Hey, greetings. My name is Gray Andrus, and I am the Chief Clinical Officer at Newhouse, Kansas City, which is the oldest domestic violence shelter in Kansas City. It's not the largest. And today I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about trauma-informed myths. Recently, I had an opportunity to meet with a colleague from Lakeside Global Institute, Diane Wagenhals. We were talking about this image. I first saw this image from Dr. Sandra Bloom as she presented at a conference at Missouri Western. Trauma-informed. When you see this image, you see that trauma-informed, from a knowledge base is about 12 to 15 hours of training. One of the things that I take away from this slide is that it's not enough to be just trauma-informed. In fact, my colleague at Lakeside Global Institute said, there are people that are trauma arrogant, yet they don't get beyond being trauma informed. They are not trauma sensitive, trauma competent, or trauma responsive. Understanding trauma and using it as a skill set is a marathon of knowledge. It's not a sprint. But there are some myths that I run into. One of the first myths that I run into is that trauma-informed means that there are no consequences. Can you imagine a world where there were no consequences? In fact, trauma-informed as a care process is all about consequences. Consequences that are rational, timely, and meaningful. Consequences that meet the client at their level of functioning. Trying to understand their lens, their unique lens, which means it's a radical empathy approach. Individuals impacted by trauma deserve control and choices, two things which are often taken away from clients, from residents, from youth in foster care who've experienced trauma. Recently, I was able to tour the Homeboys Industries in Los Angeles, California. And I walked away with a really profound thought that I've been thinking about, and that is how to have boundaries with clients, how to use consequences. Homeboys does something that I think is brilliant. When a client relapses or goes back to prison or is arrested, Homeboys doesn't give up on them. Homeboys is a program, it's the largest gang intervention in the world. It has assisted thousands of former gang members to leave gangs and to start a new life. One of their mottos is that nothing stops a bullet like a job. They have a success rate of 70% with about 30% recidivism. It's pretty amazing. Homeboys doesn't give up on a client. Homeboys says, come back to us when you're ready. Well, developmentally, this approach is right on target, right? We know from our research in domestic violence that many victims of domestic violence will leave a violent situation and return to the abuser and leave and return and leave and return before they finally leave. We know that substance abuse users will enter into treatment, will leave treatment, enter into treatment, will leave, will enter, will leave before it maybe takes effect. Being trauma-informed doesn't mean there are no consequences. It doesn't mean that we will tolerate bad behaviors. It helps us to understand where the behaviors are coming from. Being trauma-informed doesn't mean lowering our expectations. I love this quote from this article of Debunking Myths of Trauma. Staff become frustrated with youth constantly showing up late. This is a program. Their solution was close the door. Shifting to a trauma-informed care means that meeting people where they're at and creating a process to work with people as they meet expectations. In the Homeboys philosophy, as former gang members and former felons enter into the program, it isn't about perfection. It is about showing up. So as they become a trainee, it's not about being the best baker or the best, silk screener, it is about just showing up, a lot of grace, meeting that person at their level of functioning. The expectations don't change, but the way we respond when you struggle to meet the expectation is what needs to change. I love that. Boundaries are critical for our clients who've been impacted by trauma. Clear, communicated boundaries and expectations are key. That's how we help set clients. That's how we help prepare clients for consequences. Telling a client no is not a bad thing. It's good to have that level of boundary. Trauma-informed care is about working with our clients to identify times in which in their life they were successful and use those past experiences to build on. Can everyone be trauma-informed? Well, in this article, they say no. The hardest truth to share, but the reality is not everyone can work in a trauma-informed culture. There are some people who constantly just believe clients and victims of domestic violence need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But what happens when you don't even have a pair of boots? These are individuals that struggle the most with trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care within an agency has to be everybody, from administration to advocacy to plant maintenance staff, to the school staff, to the therapeutic staff. We also know that trauma-informed care is a systems level change. It means the entire staff. Trauma-informed care is not about being able to just recite brain science and neurology. It requires individuals to alter your belief system about the clients that you serve. One of the things that I think is really helpful is this concept called the parallel process from Dr. Bloom. Dr. Bloom shares that when clients feel unsafe, staff feel unsafe, and an organization is unsafe. But whose job is it to make it safe? Is it administration's job to make the organization safe? Is it the staff's job, the client's job? Bloom would say to us that it's everybody's responsibility. This parallel process works from the left to the right and the right to the left and from the center out. When staff feel overwhelmed, then the agency is overwhelmed and clients are overwhelmed. Again, it doesn't mean we don't have consequences, that we don't have boundaries, we don't hold people accountable. It's that we change the way we hold people accountable. We try to have radical empathy to understand their lens and their view of the world. Trauma explains behavior, not excuses it. A quote from a very wise therapist here at Newhouse. My good friend Stacy Baruka, a social worker, she shares on Facebook some truths to consider. Start where the client is. Social work practice does not mean perfect. When's your next appointment with yourself? There's no job worth your current or future license. It's not enough to be just trauma-informed. Practice radical empathy and seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Being trauma-informed means understanding the entire pie, not just one slice of the pie. When we do that, we'll be quick to judge. We'll judge ourselves, we'll judge staff, we'll judge the program. And when that happens, trust goes out the window. So thank you so much for taking a few minutes to join me as we think about trauma and some of the myths of being trauma-informed. Have a great day.